Hello everybody, it's Steph Davis here from flipthiswholesaler.net. I have a brand new Q&A video to share with you guys today. My question this week comes from Martin, and Martin's email reads, "Hi Steph, I'm new to wholesaling and don't understand how to accurately run comps to determine how much I should offer on properties. I've heard of the 70% formula, but I'm not sure if that will work in my market. Any help would be greatly appreciated, as this is one piece of the puzzle that is holding me back from marketing. Thank you, Martin." All right, Martin, this is an excellent question. This is probably one of the most difficult aspects when you're getting started of wholesaling, and that is figuring out how to run comps, how to determine ARV, and then how to figure out how much to offer a seller. So, what I'm going to do today is go into Zillow and show you the process that I use to determine the ARV and how much I'm going to offer the seller when I'm working in an area where I'm an area that I'm unfamiliar with. So first of all, before I get into that, Martin mentioned the 70% formula. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's 70% of ARV, and ARV means the after repaired value, or basically what a property would be worth in fixed up condition. So 70% of the ARV, then you subtract repairs, subtract your wholesale fee, and that will give you your maximum offer. So that's kind of the general rule, but it doesn't work in every market or in even every neighborhood. Sometimes you can go a little bit higher if you're in an extremely hot market. Sometimes the investors are willing to pay more, and sometimes you're going to need to go lower. It really just depends, and this is all part of your market research, and this is the information that you need to find out as you are analyzing your market. So one thing to keep in mind, that determining the ARV and determining the offer amount, it's not an exact science. It's not, you have the formula here, the 70% formula, but it doesn't work in all situations. It can vary. The percentage of ARV can vary from, city to city, or even neighborhood to neighborhood within a city. So it's not an exact science. It's something that it gets easier with practice, and, within your own market. This is why I always stress to do your due diligence, choose a farm area, whether it be a zip code in your city or a specific neighborhood, and get out there, do your research, study the comps, drive through the neighborhoods, because once you get to a point where you just automatically know the ARVs, and you'll get to that point with enough practice, when you'll have sellers that call and they'll give you the address, and you know the area so well that you don't have to do any of this research. So just keep in mind that it does get easier with practice, and that it's not an exact science, and you're going to have to put in some time and effort to become good at and accurate at coming up with your offer amount. So I use basically a 3-step process, and this is for when I'm going into areas that I'm not familiar with. Like I just mentioned, you'll get to a point, and I got to that point a long time ago, where most of the areas in my city, in St. Pete and Tampa, I know them so well, and I've done enough business over the years, and I know what the buyers are looking for. I know what they're willing to pay, so I don't really have to go in and do this process in areas that I'm familiar with. But I know a lot of you guys are just starting out, and you are not familiar with the values in the neighborhoods that you're working in. So I'm going to show you how, and I'm going to show you an example. I actually got a lead in from Kansas City, Missouri about a week or so ago, and so I'm going to show you kind of how I went about. I know absolutely nothing about the Kansas City, Missouri market, so I was basically, just like a lot of you are, starting from scratch when it comes with respect to, coming up with the ARV and what my offer would be. So I'm going to go over to Zillow, which is what I suggest if you don't have access to the MLS in your area. Zillow is good enough. The MLS is better, but you can do the research that you need to do using Zillow. So what I did here was I just zoomed in on the neighborhood, the property. I forget what the specific address was. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was on this street right here. It's Troost Avenue. So I pulled up, I just did a search for Kansas City, Missouri, and then I kind of zoomed in. You can zoom in and out here using these. So I zoomed in on the area where this property was located, and I have it set to just show me the recently sold properties. And I start out with, if you go all the way over to the end where it says more, you can choose how far back you want to go. So I usually start out with going 90 days back, and then if there aren't enough comps, I'll go back to 6 months. But the more recent the comps, the better. So I started out with 90 days and got, quite a few sales here, not a ton, but one thing I want to point out is that when I'm looking at, when I'm pulling up recent sales, I like to stay within. I don't like to cross over any, like you see here's a main highway here. I don't like to look at, the properties over here or even over here. This says it's Hyde Park. That looks like a main drag there, because what happens is, especially if you're in a big city, property values can change drastically when you cross over they can change drastically sometimes just by what block they're on the same street. But if you look here, you see like most of these comps are in the 200s and 100s. There's one for 300 here, but if you just go like right up a little bit, we have $1 million homes. There's a 1.2 million. There's a $500,000 home. So I like to look at the ones, number one, that are as close, the recent sales that are as close to the subject property as possible, and I like to stay within like the subdivision. So what I do is basically the first step is to look at the recent sales, which I have here. Like I said, they're the sales within the last 90 days, and I look at both the retail comps or sales and also the investor comps, and those are typically going to be the lowest comps in the neighborhood. And you can see here there's 3 of them just in this little, I guess, subdivision. There's one for 75, 75, and one for 73, and then the rest of them are mostly around 150, and then there are a couple in the 270s. So right off the bat, just looking at these values here, I'm guessing that my offer is probably going to be somewhere in the 70s, maybe in the 60s, maybe in the 80s, somewhere in that range, just looking at these. But what I do is I basically go in and I click on every single one of these. If you click on the dot, it opens up the entire file, I guess, for the property, and I look at, I want to make sure that I'm comparing apples to apples. So I look at, the year that the home was built. Like this one was built in 1909. The property that I got the lead on was built in the early 1800s as well. If I were to pull up a property and it was built in 2005 or 2015 or something like that, I don't use that to, that's to me not comparing apples and apples. I don't want to compare a new build with something that was built in the early 1900s. So I go through every single one of the sales. I look at the year that it was built in, the square footage, obviously bedrooms and bathrooms, lot size, and I want to focus on the comps that are closest to the, not just in distance, but also closest in property characteristics to the lead that I got, which was a 4-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,500 square feet, built in 1908. So after going through all of these, I decided to pull up, because I was still kind of unclear as to what is going on in this neighborhood. So I pulled up, I went back 6 months, and I looked at all of those comps as well. And what happened at the end of me doing all of that was that I was just pretty confused, to be honest with you, as to what the ARV was and to what I should be offering. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes you'll just go in and you look at these values and you just can't make heads or tails of them. So had this property been in the city that I live in or one nearby, my step number 2 would be, and this is what I suggest that you guys do if you're just starting to learn your market and you're not sure of market value, step number 2 would be to get in my car, get a list of these comps of these recent sales, and go drive by every single one of them. And I know that maybe sounds like a pain in the butt to do, but I cannot tell you how much what a good education you can get by actually going out and doing that. You will notice, like, some of these comps that I was looking at, they would be, they'd both be 4-bedroom, 1-bath, or 4-bedroom, 2-bath. I looked at the listings. They both look to be in similar condition. They're both, built in the same year, but one of them is worth 50 or 60 or 70,000 are sold for, even in some cases, $100,000 more. I can't, just from looking at this screen and looking at these values, I have no idea why, but most of the time, if you get in your car and you go out and you drive by each comp, you'll understand why. It might just be that the block that they are on is much nicer than the one surrounding it, and therefore the properties on that particular block get more, can sell for more, get a higher asking price or a higher sales price. So get in your car, go drive out, drive through the neighborhood, drive up and down the streets, and take a look at each one of those comps, and I can guarantee you that it will help you out tremendously in understanding. I shouldn't say I can guarantee, but in most cases, going out and doing that is going to give you a much better idea of what is going on in that particular neighborhood and why some properties are selling for more and some are selling for less. So obviously in this case, this particular lead, like I said, was in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm not going to get into my car and drive to Kansas City, Missouri, so I'm going to move on to step 3 of the process, which in my opinion is the best way to find out what you should be offering, and that is to locate some investors who are currently buying properties in this neighborhood, or if you can't find ones that are buying in the neighborhood, then investors that are buying in the city, and get their contact information, call them up, and try and get an idea of what they would pay for this particular property. Now, one way that I do that in this instance, in most counties, or I shouldn't say most, in a lot of counties, the majority of counties, you can go onto your property appraiser website, or it might be called something different, but you can do an address search and find out who the owner is. And a lot of times you can find the owner just by Googling, especially if it's a company name. You guys, if you've been watching my videos for a while, I know you've probably seen me do this before, but if it's a company name, if you just go into Google, you can a lot of times find especially if it's an investor that does a lot of business, they're probably going to have a website or something, and then give them a call and see if you can get at least a ballpark of what they would offer. So I did that. I was able to do that. This is Jackson County, I think it was. I think this is Jackson County, but I just went on to this website. It's netronline.com. Go to the click on Public Records Online. And if you put in the city and state, it will give you, let's see, this is Jackson County. If you click on that, it gives you all of the public records that are online. And here in the, let's see, is it the assessor, I think it was, that I used? I went to the assessor's website and I was able to, so what I did basically was like any of these low comps, the investor comps, like I said, like this one for 75, 73, there was one for 28, that was just basically a shell of a house, but I did an address search, found out who the owner was, Googled the owner, and I did that in this surrounding area, not just in this little square, but I was able to find about 10 or 15 buyers, investors, and gave a bunch of them a call up. And I don't give them the specific address. I just tell them what I said was, hi, my name is Steph Davis. I'm a wholesaler in St. Petersburg, Florida. I just got a lead in your city, and I'm not really that familiar with the areas. This is the street that it's on. This is, give them the general information about the property and see if I can get at least a ballpark of what they would offer. In this particular case, I was actually able to get in contact with 2 cash investors who work exclusively in this neighborhood and who have done, they buy, rehab, and resell. So they're very familiar with this neighborhood, and both of them told me that they would be interested. Now this is if the property is in the condition that I'm telling them that it is, and I'm just going by what the seller is telling me. Of course I would have to verify that, but they said if it's in the condition that I'm telling them that it is, they would be interested probably in the low to mid 70s. So I felt very confident after talking to all of the investors that I called, and these 2 in particular who work this neighborhood exclusively. I felt confident that if I could market this in the low to mid 70s, that I would be able to sell it pretty quickly. And now I already have buyers lined up if I were to have gotten this under contract, which I did not. But if I did, I would most likely be able to offload it to one of these cash investors pretty quickly. So that's it in a nutshell. That's kind of the process that I use when I'm working in areas that I'm not familiar with. Number one, look at the comps, pull the recent comps as recent as possible, 90 days, and if there aren't enough, going back 90 days and go back 6 months. Look at both the investor sales, the low sales, and the retail sales, and see if I can figure out an ARV that way. And then from there, if I'm still confused or I still, don't really know where my numbers should be, go out and drive through the neighborhood. And this is just good practice to do anyway for those of you who are just getting started, to go out and drive through the neighborhoods and just get to know. You've got to educate yourself, and you've got to do your market research. And while it does take time and effort, it's going to pay off handsomely in the long run, because like I said, you're going to get to the point where you'll get a seller that calls you, they'll give you the address, and you don't even have to do any of this anymore because you're so familiar with the neighborhoods, because you've done your market research, you know what the investors are willing to pay, you know what the ARVs are. You'll just be able to make an offer on the spot, and that's the point that you want to get to, but you do have to put in the work ahead of time. So drive through the neighborhoods, and then to take it one step further, and like I mentioned earlier, I think that is the most, and when I was starting out, that's exactly what I did. I did not use a formula. I would just find some cash investors that were buying in that particular neighborhood where I was looking at a lead, and just call them up and get a number from them, or at least a ballpark number. To me, there's no better way to make sure that your numbers are accurate than to actually talk to the people that you're going to be selling to and find out, what price points they're buying at. So one last thing that I wanted to point out, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, a lot of people will ask me about the Zestimate. Like if you go on Zillow, it gives you an estimate of what the market value is, what the ARV is, called the Zestimate. Don't ever go by that. It is correct some of the time, but a lot of the time it is not. You need to do the research yourself and come up with the ARV that way. Same thing goes for tax assessed value. A lot of people will ask me if they can use the tax assessed value as a market value. Those are almost always incorrect. So you got to do the research and put in the work yourself to come up with the ARV and your offer amount. All right, I think that does it. I went a little longer than I had anticipated, but I hope this helped. I hope this didn't confuse you guys any further. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's not an exact science, especially when you're starting out and you're just getting to know a new area. It's not like you can just, the numbers make perfect sense and you just plug them into a formula and voila, you have your offer. There's a lot of moving pieces that go into it, but the more you practice and the more you become familiar with your market, the easier it gets. I think that does it for now. Just wanted to point out too, I get people that ask me all the time if I have just a general wholesaling course. I don't really promote it that much, but I do have a walks you through from A to Z how to do a wholesale deal, from analyzing your market to marketing for motivated sellers, deal analyzation, writing up the contracts, finding the buyers, all of that. It's if you go to quickflipninja.com, it's quickflipninja.com, you can learn more there. But if you guys have any questions about what I went over, feel free to leave a comment on my blog. It's flipthiswholesaler.net. You just leave a comment there or a question in the comment section, and I'll help you out, do my best to help you out if I can. But that does it for today. You guys have an awesome afternoon, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.